Well, the president did a speech. It was well executed. It was well delivered. The content, I suspect, you would only find exciting if you are a boomer or someone boomer tier. There were a couple of good points. I guess I'll go ahead and give credit where credit is due. He did repudiate neocon warmongering. He did commit to not starting new wars and to getting out of old ones. He did needle Bernie. He made reference to the Venezuela thing and insulted socialism and said that America would never be socialist. Bernie's reaction shot was funny, obviously. Would have been even funnier if the U.S. wasn't already substantially socialist and not in a good way. So, that being said, what are the major flaws with the speech? What were the major weaknesses of the speech? And that would be pretty much most of the rest of the speech. Particularly all the time he spent, and there was much of it, in several different stretches where he spent talking about anti-Semitism and Mahal of Cost and World War II and Germany and Jerusalem, Israel, all this stuff, right? All this stuff, which I don't know why a Republican president thinks he needs to mention any of this stuff, frankly, because the people this matters to are 2% of the U.S. population, and practically none of them vote Republican, right? A few of them contribute Republican, but most of them even contribute to the other side. So, you might as well write off that demographic and just, deal with their opposition, whatever form it may end up taking, because that's pretty much the same boat you're going to be in regardless. These are the people who have been dogging him his entire campaign, his entire presidency. I don't know why he still feels the need to, suck up to this particular demographic who are not going to stop dogging him, right? They're not going to call off their dogs, even if a few of them support him or are involved with his administration, and many of them are. They're not going to call off the others who are dogging him, who are contributing to the other side. All right? It's just pointless. Why even bother pandering to these people? And as far as Israel, we did pay for Israel's wall. We paid to help Israel build a wall, a giant wall along their southern border to keep out unwanted immigrants and other borders. So, being as we have been their greatest ally in that respect, I feel the least that they could do is pay for our wall, or to front Mexico the money to pay for our wall. And, we do give them a lot of money, so the least they can do, since we paid for their wall, is, they can help pay for our wall with a little bit of our money. Because that's what greatest allies do for each other. And I know they would understand. I'm sure they have plans for that money already. But I know they would understand, and they want us to continue being their greatest ally in the future. So, maybe they want to help us secure our borders so that, we don't have all these people coming in who don't care about Israel's interests and Israel's geopolitical position in the world and all these other things that people flowing across our border don't care about. So, I know they would be willing to make that sacrifice for us, since we are their greatest allies, and they're our greatest allies, and that's what greatest allies do for each other. I mean, we already built them a wall, so it's the least they could do for us in return. And if that's going to happen, then yeah, fine. Our president can talk about the Holocaust for a little while. But if not, I just don't see the point. Now, another thing that was notable about this speech was the white outfits that most of the Democrat women and some of the Republican women were wearing. And this is suffrage white, apparently. And, they sat there kind of stone-faced while the president talked about wars and baby murdering and all this other stuff. Holocaust, civil rights, black unemployment. They just sat there kind of stone-faced and and not really very responsive. And then he starts talking about women in the workforce and women in Congress and all this kind of stuff. And these people are jumping up, whooping and cheering and clapping, about the one group of people they care about, which is themselves, apparently. So that was just a little showcase of, how irresponsible it was to enfranchise this particular demographic. And I've talked about the franchise in the past. I've talked about suffrage and what a horrible mistake it was. And it was, because giving women the vote is giving them something for nothing. They don't fight for it. They don't fight. They don't participate in the production of organized violence in a large way. And so, their violence didn't need to be bought off with the vote. And they're also not, contributing to producing the law and producing the policy that they vote for by fighting for it. Right? The wars that are going to result, it's not their bodies filling the trenches. The wars that, and their voting will result in wars. It will not prevent wars. Right? So the reason we enfranchise each other as men, for example, is to prevent wars, because it's cheaper to vote about stuff than to fight about it. Right? But if we give women the vote, they're just going to vote for, whatever the hell they want. Who knows? I don't even think they know most of the time, but they do vote systematically and predictably for certain things that they consider to be in their interests. And ultimately, the costs of those are just going to be too much to bear, and there's going to be a war over it, because people are going to go back to violence. And so women cause the outcomes of elections and the outcomes of likely conflicts to diverge, because they're contributing to the election, they're not contributing to the possible conflict. And so at a certain point, it's too costly to just keep going along with the results of the elections when we could have a war that's much cheaper to overturn the results of elections. And, ordinarily that situation wouldn't arise, because the election is a pretty good proxy for who would win the war. But when you throw women into the mix and they're voting systematically in one direction, then those outcomes diverge. Voting is no longer a good way. A head count is no longer a good way to determine who is likely to win the war, because a certain category of people are not going to contribute to the war in a meaningful way. But they do sway the outcome of the vote. Anyway, that's just a little aside. All the sucking up to that crowd was pretty pathetic, and I understand, why he feels like he has to do it. He's pandering to the boomer base. He's pandering to the woman vote, for 2020. Well, whatever. He's not getting mine that way. But if he wants to pander to those demographics, women are 51% of the population. So, my takeaway from that is we're kind of on our own for 2020 and 2024. Who knows if we're going to be even having elections at that point. But if we are, we're on our own. That's how it appears right now. Of course, the Democratic response was incredibly weak, so who knows? Maybe he can win in 2020. They put a blob up on the television to deliver their response. An individual who has no charisma, who said nothing inspiring, who said nothing even relevant to anything he said, to be honest. It just kind of sounded like a canned response, just like a bunch of random Democrat talking points that had no relation to anything that he said. It's just like, oh, we're Democrats, we say these things, we'll just say them again for you here. And, a lot of people a lot of people noticed and commented that she looked like she was standing in front of a green screen or in a studio or something. It could have all been pre-recorded, honestly, because the individual they picked to do this response was not a high IQ individual, so she can't really be expected to, deliver an actual response to what he actually said in a short amount of time. That's just not in the cards. So not only was the response scripted, almost certainly, but it may even have been pre-recorded. That certainly looks to be the case. I don't know that that's a fact, but that's kind of what it looks like to me. I even watched a little bit of Bernie's response. And, here's a guy, I say a little bit because I couldn't get through it. His sonorous drone virtually puts me to sleep. It's impossible to focus on what he's saying for very long. And it just sounded like the same old crap. It just sounded like the same old Bernie crap. You know, this guy is not totally wrong about all of the problems that he diagnoses. It's just that his only solution seemed to be tax and give. And, you know, that's not going to do anything good. It's only going to accelerate the decline in most cases. So, this Bernie guy is not a real solution to anything. He's kind of a clown, to be honest. He's kind of a joke. He couldn't even beat Hillary. He couldn't even, like, outwit or outmaneuver, you know, the Democratic Party politics machine. You know, he's pretty useless, to be honest. And his ideology, his socialist ideology, is a joke. I don't understand the appeal of this guy at all. He has no charisma either. He just sounds like a goofy old man. And that's being generous. So, he did say that not everything Donald Trump said was true in his speech. And I hope he wasn't referring to the Holocaust stuff, because that stuff is absolutely true. And questioning or criticizing it in any way is just beyond the pale. You know, I hope that wasn't where Bernie, of all people, was going with that. But, you know, just in case he was, I want to firmly disavow Bernie Sanders and anyone related to him if that's where he was trying to go with that. But anyway, you know, more on this stuff. There'll be additional content I upload for my contributors, my subscribers, and if any of you have been holding off on contributing just because you don't like Patreon or you don't want to go through Patreon or whatever, I'm also including links this time to Subscribestar and Bitcoin, if you want to do that. And certainly would help to create more and better content in the future. Talk to you later. Bye.